Hello, my love. Welcome to this video and welcome to this channel. I'm Mafalda, and today I want to discuss the very well-known concept of spiritual bypassing, which is vital and of the utmost importance in today's day and age, since we are experiencing a mass spiritual awakening, and spiritual bypassing has become, over the years, very, very proliferous. So, why is that so? As spirituality has moved into the mainstream arena, a lot of spiritual concepts and truths have been watered down for marketing purposes. And so, the concept of higher frequency and higher vibration is one of those concepts. There is a lot of truth to these concepts. However, without the proper integration of these concepts, and I spoke about the importance of integration in my previous video, then you are accessing a very superficial layer of this concept and not, in fact, embodying it, and therefore not truly understanding. Understanding from a mental or intellectual perspective or standpoint is not full understanding. Something is not fully understood until it is embodied, until it is second nature. And so spiritual bypassing creates more fragmentation in the psyche and more distortion. And the way you'll be able to identify this in your reality, in your life, is if you come across someone who says all the right things, know all the concepts, but then you look at their lives or their attitude or their behavior or how they show up, and it doesn't match. There's a massive disconnect and, in fact, cognitive dissonance within the psyche. So how did we get here? Let's talk about what frequency is. So frequency is, in this case, when we're talking about the amount of times, so how often, frequency, that's what it means. How frequently do you go to the gym? Well, I go 3 times per week. Well, the frequency with which you go to the gym is 3 times per week. So it's the number, the frequency. So higher frequency means higher oscillation. And here we're talking about waves. So you see, when you see a wave, the wavelength, it goes like this, right? It's actually a spiral. So you're just seeing it from a different perspective. But higher frequency means higher oscillation. So lower frequency in terms of how many times you go to the gym would be, I go once a week. Higher frequency in terms of how many times you go to the gym would be 5 times per week. So you see 5 is higher than 1. 5 times per week, higher frequency, 1 time per week, lower frequency. So in terms of the level of oscillation of certain emotions or states of being or states of consciousness, you will have some that are higher than others. So let's say if we look at the scale of consciousness, we take fear or we take guilt or we take shame. These emotions are lower in frequency in terms of the oscillation of the wave than emotions like courage, or elevating into states of being, not emotions, like wisdom, light, love, and unconditional love. So love would be at the level of 500 and unconditional love would be at the level of 540. And this is, we're talking about frequency. So is it true that in order to expand your consciousness, in order to come into your best life, in order to fulfill your purpose, in order to live a more prosperous, abundant, fulfilling life, you have to raise your frequency? Well, truthfully, yes, that is what's happening when you are up leveling or upgrading. You are raising your level of frequency. You're raising your baseline frequency or your station of identity, which just means where you spend most of your day. All of us experience a spectrum. So, yes, of course, it is true. Yes, you are at a higher frequency if you mostly spend your days in wisdom or light or love than if you spend most of your time feeling guilty, ashamed, in fear, or even angry. So there is a difference. One is lower, one is higher. The issue here is that, number one, higher doesn't mean better. And again, this is one of the issues with coming at these concepts from a superficial perspective, because we live in a world of duality. We are the ones, as humans at this level of consciousness, that project good and bad onto it. Higher does not mean better than lower. It just means higher oscillation, lower oscillation. That's number one. There doesn't have to be judgment of the lower. You can accept that you would rather spend most of your time in love as opposed to anger, without judging anger, without resisting anger. You see? That's one important point. Another important point is that people often think that raising your frequency or becoming high vibes is all about denying the lower emotions. And you'll see this is where the term bypassing or spiritual bypassing comes from. Whereas that's not the case at all. So in order to come into higher states of consciousness and, let's say, vibrate at the frequency of love every day, all day, that doesn't mean that you go through life saying, I can't feel angry, I can't feel angry, I can't feel ashamed, I can't feel ashamed. And then every time shame or guilt or anger comes up, you just deny it, push it aside, avoid it, or numb it. That is what bypassing is. Why is that? Because then you're not really in love. Then it's an illusion of love. And this is where spirituality has become so performative. It's not about looking like you're at the level of consciousness of love and behaving according to what you think and you identify as loving behavior. You see how that's all a play of duality still? You see how that's all still in the lower levels of consciousness? Because it's performative. Love doesn't look the same in all situations. Love might look completely different. Love includes discernment. Love includes love for self. So, for example, you might think that people pleasing might look like love, and so you engage in it, you think that you're raising your frequency, when in fact you're lowering it. That's not love, that's performative. Because if you have to put on a mask, if you have to put on a show to pretend that you are higher frequency than you are, what you're creating is more fragmentation. What happens when you're creating more fragmentation is you are making the parts of you that are still ashamed or that are still guilty, let's say parts of your psyche that are parts of your inner child, for example, feel even worse. So you're actually creating more shame by resisting the anger or the fear, let's say, than by accepting it or by allowing it to be seen. And so shame is way lower on the scale of consciousness than, let's say, acceptance or even willingness or even neutrality. So you see how being neutral about the fact that you feel angry is actually higher frequency than pretending you're not angry? And this is where people get confused. Yes, you do elevate your core baseline frequency, but you can only do that once you've mastered the lower, once you've integrated the lower. It works more like levels of a game. You can't hop onto the next level if you haven't mastered the one before. So if you haven't felt your way through your shame, your trapped and stored guilt and anger, then you won't be able to elevate onto the next level. Another important thing to mention when it comes to this topic is that having your core baseline frequency or station of identity around 500, let's say, or 540, which is love or unconditional love, does not mean that you don't experience anger. It means that you feel anger and then you pop back. All of us, this is a spectrum. Life is a spectrum. We're not static. We know that everything is always changing, even through the law of vibration that comes to us from the Hermetic principles. Nothing is static. So the fact that you are stationed at love doesn't mean that you won't experience anger or that you won't experience another emotion. However, because you've expanded your nervous system capacity to be able to allow emotions to come through, you feel the emotion, it lasts 30 seconds, which is what it's supposed to last, and then it's released. It moves through you. It's transmuted by your natural inherent mechanism of, or by your nervous system. It's what it's made for. It's natural, it's intrinsic, it's inherent. And you just go back to your station of identity or core baseline frequency, which is love. So you see again where this concept of high vibes has been used to shame people for having emotions, when it's actually got nothing to do with what it really means to be at a higher level of frequency in your everyday life. So we enter these ways of operating that in fact are shaming us for our own humanity, just because it is true that it is a lower level of consciousness to be angry all day doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with being angry. You see how that's just more judgment, that's just more fear. So how could that lead to higher frequency? How could that lead to high vibes? So spiritual bypassing, in fact, is very low on the frequency scale, and it really stunts people in their spiritual growth, and it keeps people stuck within that fourth dimension, which is also a level of frequency, a range of frequency, and it's the most polarized dimension. And you can see then how somebody that has come across all kinds of different spiritual concepts, that in fact knows a lot, is sinking deeper into separation consciousness, because they're not taking in the full truth of these concepts, and they're not doing the shadow work. Yes, this is absolutely key, because I was talking about mastering the lower levels, allowing your anger, your guilt, your shame to move through you. Well, you can't do that if you haven't done shadow work, if you haven't processed that which has been residing in your subconscious mind. And that process, let me tell you, does not look like love and light. And so spiritual bypassing also is fed through this avoidance of shadow work, through this avoidance of the subconscious mind. However, all this subconscious patterning, it just doesn't disappear. It does not. Energy must be transmuted. And we know that both emotions and thoughts are energy. So if you have a lot of subconscious patterning, just trying to consciously force yourself to be in a state of love isn't actually going to clear out your wounding and all your distortion, allowing you to anchor those higher frequencies for real. So I hope that this sheds some light on the concept of frequency, so that on the one hand, it helps you stop avoiding the denser, lower frequency emotions, because it helps you understand that you must learn how to feel your way through them in order to not have them control your life, and in order to feel regulated and at peace on a daily basis, regardless of what's playing out in your life. And on the other hand, I hope this has also helped you to understand that you don't have to shy away from higher frequency, thinking that that's all bypassing and that that's all ego. so that you also don't keep yourself stuck in the anger and the guilt and the shame, because of course we want to make room for those emotions, but we want to process and release them because we do want to reach higher levels of consciousness. It is possible to live from a place of peace. So you see how on both sides and from both sides, from both perspectives, not understanding and not integrating the concept of frequency and higher levels of consciousness can polarize us in fear of the other side and keep us stunted in our growth. Great. I hope this brings some much needed clarity and insight. Do let me know if you have any specific questions about these topics. I'm just fascinated by this and really called to offer my wisdom. Oh, sorry. Whoopsie. Offer my wisdom to be of service and hopefully help you grow and help you shift. And if you do want one-to-one support and guidance, I do work with subconscious patterning, nervous system regulation, all kinds of transformation processes. And it's just incredible the results that you get when you really do put in the work and you really do show up for yourself. So all the information about that is below.